Welcome back. Transportation is a critical part of our lives, which is why we're talking about fuel. And this time we're going to another form of transportation, which is air transportation. There's been a lot that's been going on within that sector, and that is why we're bringing it to the fore. Some advancements and a lot of challenges as well. Remember that the Honorable Minister for Aviation and Aerospace Development, Festus Keyamo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, was in Seattle. He signed some deals, or some on the memorandum of understanding, I should contextualize this, with Boeing about how to help and support the sector in Nigeria. And he was quite excited with that. We also have the delisting of Nigeria from Cat 1 by the US and all of that. So we want to look at all of the potpourri of issues within that sector and going forward. If you want to fly right now, the money you used to travel with to outside our country is what you used to do, return from Port Harcourt to Lagos or Lagos to Abuja and all of these places. What is playing out in that sector is what we'll explore within the time we have. We've been joined in the program by Mr. Alex Nwuba, is the second Vice President, Aviation Roundtable. Mr. Alex Nwuba, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
Like my colleague, they said, I'm not sure, are you working from home or you're in your office because of this situation? You fly, but I don't know. Are you working from home?
I'm always mobile. No, I'm actually, I'm attending a conference to write the policy on aviation, Avia Cargo, with the Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria and all of the stakeholders in the sector, NAFDAC, NAT. So I'm actually sitting in a hotel somewhere where we're locked up for a few days. And so I arranged for a quiet space to have this conversation with you. So I'm always mobile.
Maybe the first question before we get to some of the details about the delisting and the memorandum of understanding and what it can do. Let's talk about the issue of Jet 1 fuel. Is that what is part of the cost of the why the air ticket is now quite expensive, and how readily available do you get it?
Well, jet fuel used to be 40% of the operating cost of an airline. Now it's closer to 75%. And so when you have that quantum of increase in any component that you use to run your business, it's going to be reflected because you have to recover that cost from somewhere. And aviation recovers its cost from traveling public. So naturally, airfares will go up. So there are a number of factors coming together to increase the baseline cost of airlines, and that cost is being passed on into these higher fares, including the exchange rate, because it's a dollar business. 80% of your expenses are in US dollars or related currencies, and the rest are operating costs. Even the fuel itself is a dollar-based component of your business. So these factors are coming together to raise the fares. But what we think we have to note is, even though the fares appear to be increasing by large scale, on the relative term to the US dollar, it's remaining stable or actually lower. So we have to look at it from pure economic nature of the fares.
Okay, just one more on this Jet 1. How much do you buy Jet 1 fuel now?
Well, it's I would say it's about 70 to 80% of the operating cost of an airline. Insurance is another major cost, and then the taxes and levies. So if you look at your airline ticket, for example, you would see a fare of 20,000 and taxes of 100,000, and so these are all the things that go up into adding to the component. So fare prices, aviation fuel prices are stable at about the $3 to $4 range, but the naira has gone up considerably from say 400 naira to 1,600 naira to a dollar. So that's reflected in the price. Multiple exchange rate components, which is adding to the increase of the fares.
Well, we know that flying is not an all-commerce thing. It's for people that are privileged to have the kind of fun they have to travel because they want speed and a bit of comfort. So let's now break a few things down. Let's begin with the delisting. For persons who don't understand what all of that means, perhaps you bring clarity. But from what we know, Nigeria has been delisted after being listed in Category 1 in 2010 by the US, and that is, they gave some explanation. So there was a bit of confusion as to why they were delisted. So that simply means no Nigerian aircraft can fly directly from Nigeria to any of the cities in the States, if I understand what that means properly. So maybe you bring some clarity as to what is behind this delisting, because we read on one hand that it has nothing to do with safety issue because ICAO has cleared us with our audits and all of that, but because no indigenous flight from Nigeria has been able to, raise its profile to the point where we have that direct flights within a certain period of time, and that's why this delisting happened. So you are a player in the sector. Help us break it down.
Okay, let's start with aviation should be an all-commerce business. The problem is we haven't, as a structure, created the environment for everybody to fly. And so that possibility exists. We simply need to create that environment. And we've been having these engagements with the regulator as to easing certain categories of aircraft operators so that they can enter this market and provide cheaper flying experiences. And that is why Kenya is one of the leading economies in the aviation sector, because they've created this kind of environment. As to the issue of delisting, it's for me the same issue that I had in the future talk we'll be talking about, which is Emirates not coming to Nigeria. But delisting simply means the following. The US requires that all countries operating to the US fall into either a category 1 or category 2. Let's start with the easier one that we found ourselves. Category 2 means that the environment from which you're operating under a number of circumstances will not allow the US to allow you to come directly with aircraft operating from the environment to the US. And there are a number of factors. We have stated what we believe to be our own factor, but it may or may not be the case. So the airlines that may not come to the US from their countries include A, where the regulator is not deemed strong enough to supervise safely the conduct of that industry, where no carrier has operated from that country within 2 years, where the FAA or the US government is concerned that operating flights from that country to the US may pose a risk to the US society and a number of factors. Now, if you overcome these constraints, then you are then raised to category 1, which then allows you to operate directly with your own registered aircraft to the US. So by being delisted, it simply means that no Nigerian registered carrier, because of these factors, can operate directly to the US. But there is the opportunity, which has been clarified by the Civil Aviation Authority, whereby if we then choose to wet lease, that is lease an aircraft registered in a country that has category 1, crewed by pilots that operate under category 1, which means that that airline is under the appropriate supervision or technical means or all of these other factors that is comfortable to the US, then we can use that aircraft out of Nigeria to the US. Delisting simply means that they find us not meeting the needs to come to the US. And one of the examples is, and you talk about traveling and signing all kinds of deals, one of the challenges that we have not created the appropriate security defenses around our airports. And the result is that we occasionally find people walking from the city into the airport, sitting on board aircraft, getting inside the airplane's wheels and being carried abroad, where by the time you get there, you don't realize there's no oxygen in that space. And when the landing gear is opened in the UK, you see somebody drop out of the aircraft and fall onto a building, which shows that our airports are not secure, and that is one of the considerations. So delisting simply means that Nigeria has not been found worthy to operate airliners out of Nigeria to the US. The problem, therefore, is that this did not just happen. It is not the result of something this administration did. It's something that's been there. Unfortunately, Nigerian carriers were talking about going to the US without being aware that we had listed that it was impossible under their current configuration to fly to the US. So it is not impossible to fly to the US. It simply means that we need to get our act together internally in order to conduct flights with our own airplanes from Nigeria to the US.
All right, let's come back home before we talk about the US, because I have flown before with less than 20,000 naira. In fact, there was a day, I don't know whether it was a mistake or they were just trying to be some form of a largesse. Almost like 9,000 to 12,000 in those days. And now if you don't have over 100,000 naira, I don't even think of one-way trip. That could have taken us like a return ticket for like 3 times, depending on the city you're going to. From where you sit and from the operator's point of view, given what is going on in the country, because traveling by road now is quite dangerous. Sadly, that is not supposed to be what we should be talking about on national television, but that's the truth, because you're at risk of recklessness in terms of the drivers, and the bigger one is the issue of insecurity. So some people who travel by air is not because they really want to travel by air, because the roads are not safe, and now the prices is cancelling them out. Is there any hope or what can be done to begin to look at how this can come down as much as possible? What is the government not doing or the operators are asking for that is not being answered, that is making this to continue to go higher and higher? Now, if we see flights of 80,000 naira, we're literally rushing to pay. I mean, economy class, not to even talk about the business class.
Well, the answer is the economy. When you bought a ticket for 12,000 naira, what was the exchange rate at the time? And so if you look at the exchange rate of a 100,000 naira ticket and 1,600 to the dollar, you find that you're immediately in the same amount, same degree of space. So we've got to solve the economic problems. That is the key to cracking the whole thing, is that we've got to get our economy on track. And getting our economy on track is not really, like you said, bringing the matter home about how we can go to the US or to Dubai or everywhere else. We can, as citizens within our economy, fix our economic problems. Once we fix our economic problems, we'll moderate, one, the exchange rate. Now we are able to produce locally jet fuel and all the kinds of fuels and oils that are required in the industry, which means we did not add a dollar component to it, and so we can moderate those prices. But also, there's another economic factor, which is inflation, which is raising those costs based on inflationary rates, as well as the fact that the products themselves are international in nature. So those costs will be affected by the international price of it. So, like I started, the airfares have not gone up themselves. What has happened is the naira has been devalued to the point that it appears. Unfortunately, as we continue to devalue the naira, we do not continue to increase the people's income. So while you are making 100,000 and could afford two flights a month with you and your family, if you're still making now 200,000, you barely cannot afford to go even by road. So it's the economy we need to fix, not the aviation sector. There's work to be done in the aviation sector, but truly we need to fix the economy, and that's the solution to our problem.
So let me just ask this general question, because after all of the terminologies are used, all of the MOUs are signed and all of that, the passengers, they have their own demands as well, sort of like this MOU, and they want to see better quality of service. They want to at least be able to predict their travel, not that you book a flight for 12 noon and the flight doesn't leave up until 8 p.m., not once, not twice. You know, you want to be able to go to the bathrooms in the airport and see that the bathrooms are good. You know, you don't have to cover your nose or rush out. And you know these things. You want to be able to walk into the airport and the cooling system is working well. The waiting areas are very comfortable. The smell of the airport is, you know, as I use that term, funny morals. So those are the expectations from Nigerians. And I wonder for you, if this is also in the mix, as yes, we have the MOUs, we have the agreements, but those infrastructure, they're quite important, not just for us here. It's also important for people coming in to do business. I can tell about your country once I get to your airport. Once I look around, I can imagine the kind of culture in that country. Is that something you also think should be on the front burner?
Would separate the MOU from the issues you raised. We haven't seen the MOU, so we don't know what the terms are. But MOUs are not really agreements. It's a spirit of understanding that exists between two parties. And in this case, the federal government has entered into a spirit of agreement with Boeing. The relevance of that, I really cannot tell. Even if I read the documents, it's not a binding obligation on either of the parties. But you raised the most pertinent question. At the center of aviation is the customer, and he has his expectations. One thing we must applaud this administration, and in particular the Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria, is if you arrive on an international flight today, the managing director, Luku, who's been on this show, has cleaned up the place. You arrive, it's air-conditioned, it's clean. You don't see rats running around as much as you used to. Toilets smell nicer. People are much more courteous. Of course, we've had the incident of the immigration officer asking the usual Nigerian question, what did you bring for us? Those issues are being addressed. And I think that is one of the key things that is going on at this meeting where we come with the Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria. Well, we're drafting what we call standard operating procedures that would affect all of the players that are within the airport, as well as SLAs, service level agreements, so that when you come to the airport to do a service, including the concessionaires, the guys that sell you chicken and meat pie at the airport, how do you conduct that business appropriately for the type of environment that the airport is? So basically, these are the issues being addressed. You talk about late flights. You know, the only reliable flight in Nigeria is the first flight in the morning. Thereafter, all of the Nigerian factor issues start to step in, and they become later and later, and ultimately you get cancellations. These are being addressed by, you can see the very aggressive pulse of the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, holding people's feet to the fire. So we should see some improvements. The key problem with late flights today is, again, the dollar. Airlines don't have the resources and availability of foreign exchange to take their airplanes for maintenance and return them to operation. So what we've seen is a degradation of service led by the degradation of equipment on ground. So while an airline may have 20 aircraft, you would find only 5 operational. You have, so cleaner airports are on the timetable for the airport authority. They're handling that. You will find that going. The cooling systems are greatly improved, but these are the products that we're discussing about that. The smell, like you indicated, I've spoken to late flight. But you see, infrastructure is more important than MOUs. We need to sit at home and solve our domestic policy problems as well as infrastructure problems before we talk about bringing in new airplanes or conducting flights to foreign countries. Nigerians need to get around domestically. There are already mechanisms and routes for foreigners to come to Nigeria, maybe not through Nigerian carriers at the moment.
All right.
Yes.
Mr. Nwuba, a very strong point you've raised, and I'm sure the Honourable Minister is listening, and so that we set our priorities right. It's great to do those things in terms of those signings, but put our acts together is also quite important. I must thank you, Second Vice President, Aviation Roundtable, Mr. Alex Nwuba. Thank you for coming on the program. We appreciate you, sir.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.